The certitude of self-knowledge is found in the identity of that knowledge and being. In self-knowledge, the conception of I know this is absent. And so likewise, its corollary, the doubt, I do not know this, is also non-existent. In the knowledge so-called that is of a conceptual or perceptual character, I know this is a curious combination of the reality of our own being the luminosity of our own consciousness, and some objective thought form. Self-knowledge is entirely non-objective. And in it, there is neither an individual knower nor an object known. The constancy, the ever-sameness of self-knowledge has nothing to do with what is perceived and conceived. It is not determined by any bodily or sensory state. It is not determined by any mental mode or state. The very nature of the knower himself is the knowledge. So this, therefore, is not a topic that can be studied. But direct experience, timeless experience, is solidly realized by a profound inquiry into that very knower. Even the one that seems as if individualized, who, when caught up in the imagination of duality, says, I know this, I do not know this. If, as the Maharshi has instructed, we inquire into for whom is the knowledge, or for whom is the ignorance, and discern the real nature of I, that knowledge which so discerns is in substance the very knower himself. As Shankara has pointed out, Brahman alone is capable of knowing Brahman. The Maharshi has revealed self-knowledge, the self knowing itself, of itself, by itself. Who is it that could stand apart and say, I know this? Or who could doubt and say, this may be so, but I don't know this? Who is the one called I? In yourself. Can that one be a body, which is merely the known? An image projected within the mind by the mind in the waking state? Can that I be the mind, which, as Sri Bhagavan has said, is but a bundle of thoughts, inert in themselves? What is the definition of I? Your own nature. Is there one knower or a multiplicity of knowers? Is there a knower who is pure consciousness? And another one, be it called ego, mind, individual, soul, or what have you? If it would be a multiplicity, who would know the multiplicity? It still boils down to a single one. inquire within yourself to perceive, not through the senses, of course, and not through mere thought, all of which is objective to you, but to perceive with real knowledge what in truth you are. That which is known as God, the Lord of all the universe, to those who perceive a world, is the very same thing that is known to those who deeply meditate as the consciousness which is the witness of all. And to those who inquire and know the self as it is, that very same one transcends all the previous definitions and abides as the unborn, uncreated absolute, for which there is nothing else to be witnessed, nor any object ever created. We should know our identity as that. Such knowledge does not come bodily, does not come conceptually. The knowledge is realized within yourself by a deep inquiry. Who am I? And when realized, it is found to be innate, identical with being. And as there is no second kind of being, be it an ego, a mind, or anything else, there is in truth no one in ignorance. Knowledge is not a possession of anyone, and there is no ignorant being. If the one who appears as if ignorant inquires to know his own nature, he finds only liberation, pure knowledge. And what he has found, he himself is. The certitude of this knowledge lies in being it. Being it does not mean a mode of mind, does not mean thinking about it. Being as knowledge is not a possession, nor can it be lost. The illusion which is not is gone. The knowledge sought is actually ever existent. Look deeply within yourself to understand what's being hinted at this morning. And if at any point you have a question, please feel free to ask. Or if you wish to relate your own experience, please feel free to speak.
When I look within to see what is the nature of this ego, all that is really there seems to be consciousness, to be Brahman. And, if there's an idea of something else, that idea of something else, of course, is only Brahman. You spoke today of making this knowledge constant. I'm not sure exactly the word you used, but at the end of it, you spoke of that, and I'm very interested in hearing you say more of that if you can.
The Maharshi has said, you can find this in a passage in Talks, Sri Ram Maharshi, that unsteadiness of knowledge is due to the presence of vasanas, tendencies. And conversely, the destruction of vasanas, the destruction of tendencies, brings about steadiness of knowledge. So it is the tendencies that represent the steadiness or unsteadiness. And we just loosely or casually say the knowledge is steady, the knowledge is unsteady. Really, the knowledge is quite beyond all that. It is of a transcendent nature. The steadiness and unsteadiness appearance is due to the presence or absence of vasanas. Understand vasanas to be the tendencies manifesting in the mind based on the misidentifications, the form of the misidentifications, the form of attachments. These are the vasanas.
Now, to resolve the vasanas, we're taught negation at one level, and the negation certainly is not a quick mental dismissal, but the negation seems like it really has to come from this sense of identity. See that within that is still just Brahman, and your identity is Brahman, and how can that have anything to do with that imagination?
Is your identity, your existence, declared by the Upanishads to be Brahman, is that quick or slow? Can something ever existent be determined or be discussed in terms of time? It is similar with the destruction of ignorance. While the mental or intellectual idea of negating something mentioned by you might be of some use, the real inquiry is always mind transcendent. The mental aspect is too cumbersome. It's not the right tool for the job. It's like using a crowbar to try to sew a silk cloth.
And like Brahman, it's either slow or fast.
Now, if in your experience you still feel something appears, something arises, find out for whom it is. If you do so, you will find out that whatever it is, the object part of your experience, it is only a mirror image of the definition of the subject. Find out the real nature of the subject, and then say if anything appears or arises. If there is unsteadiness in knowledge, unsteadiness in the experience, what are you going to do? Find out the source of the unsteadiness. The cause or the source will always be the definition of yourself. You cannot make it steadier. But you can remove the disturbance, so-called, which is the illusion of the separate individual, and all the definitions that are dependent upon or appended to that individual assumption. Since they are composed purely of ignorance, the removal is always a negation in knowledge, knowledge of your identity. Since we are not producing anything new, nor are we involved in a transformation or a new kind of attainment, it's simply the revelation of the ever-existent. All that is necessary is the removal of the presently standing imagination. To see the rope, all that is necessary is the removal of the imagination of a snake. The rope is already there. We do not make the rope stand still. It's not a snake, it's not moving. We just remove the imagination that there is a snake. So it is with the self.
So, as you were speaking in the discourse, I was thinking that whenever I kind of think about knowing the self or anything else, it's good to know who it is that knows it. Because then otherwise it's, mistaken identities. Because then the objects become real in a certain sense, because I've assumed, if it's not investigated, that I'm a body, world, etc. So it seems like that would apply to any known thing.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing the self, or it's sort of thinking I know something, an object or not, thought.
So, speaking along these lines, first there is the unmodified consciousness. Somehow, that's the big trick, somehow it gets modified, supposedly, becomes thought form. The form of the thought is always an object, which, although it doesn't exist separately from the thought form or from the consciousness which knows it, is assumed as a separate thing, upon which is projected the reality of one's own existence, the knowing quality coming out as known of pure consciousness, both of which are yourself. And then we arrive at the dazzling conclusion, I know this. While all the while it's only our own existence, our own consciousness, entirely undifferentiated, vast, all-pervading, and without anything else that really is.
So the confusion right at the point of, I guess either misidentifying, or not misidentifying, but maybe superimposing myself onto something objective of that thought. Because it is kind of interesting that thought seems like it has form, but upon just a little bit of introversion, it doesn't seem like it has any form at all, right? I mean, it's what?
Thought seems to have form, and yet there is nothing existing as form except the thought itself. If we remove the form aspect, negate that from the thought, what remains? Is there any such thing as a formless thought?
Yeah, but it seems like it's yourself, as you said, right, earlier, right? That really...
That's all that remains. That's all that was actually there. Just yourself, which is unalloyed consciousness.
So it's the...
So do you think?
To be a thinker, you have to, I mean, it's kind of almost ridiculous to think about what is normally taken to be the thinker. It's the body with the brain in it. And that is...
That's the idea, but who thinks about that?
Yeah, but it's almost totally ridiculous because that's contained in thought itself.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole notion of... So if you subtract out even the body part of it, then where the heck would the thinker sprout from?
And if the background consciousness is of a formless nature, how would a thinker emerge therefrom?
Unless it was always formless, never anything other. I mean,
Then thoughts wouldn't really exist, nor a thinker.
Yeah. Yeah, the thinker especially, right? Because...
So, even now, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I'm trying to find where it is. And it seems like it's only in that notion.
The notion that there could be a notion?
Yeah.
The thought that there could be another thought?
I don't know. Can you explain? I don't understand. Because I was thinking it came back to always where I, take myself to be. In other words, if it's...
So are you a thinker? If you are not a thinker, how can you take yourself to be anything? You abide only as pure consciousness. As is the case with the thinker, so with the object portion, the thought. Ever so many rishis and yogis recommend that one be free from thought. We can see this many times in the Maharshi's instructions as well, to be free from thought. The self is described as being free from thought. If it is truly freedom from thought, it must be permanently so. It must be eternally so. Not touching thought at one point, and then not touching it at another.
Yeah, I mean, that would apply to any ignorance, in a sense, right?
Exactly so. So has thought ever touched your being? Does being ever become a thought? Thought cannot exist without being, but if being never becomes a thought, what can we say of the thinker and his thoughts? Contained within the thinker is the idea that there can be other thoughts, some object portion for him. It is all one supposition. So what is actually existing?
I don't quite see where. Okay, in that place where I call myself as an individual, I don't really quite, if I look for it, I don't necessarily see where it starts. However, I have a notion that it will start. That's a problem. So it's right there then.
How do you know that you have a notion it will start?
From the place, same place that it probably starts from.
Has it actually started? If the I has been born, it may be reborn. Has it been born?
It's kind of mind-blowing. Just even thinking about that is interesting.
You say you have...
That eliminates even all past.
Yes. So with realization, the realization extends past, present, and future. Time becomes irrelevant. The realization is not an event. When you say, I have the notion that it will recur, the I that possesses this notion, is that the self? Or supposedly somebody else?
Well, it's definitely not the self. Because it can only be for an outward going. You know, it's sort of like it's outward going.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's created.
All right. Now have you...
Going doesn't create.
Now have you actually seen the outward going one?
See, that's sort of what I was thinking about before. That seems like it eliminates everything. In other words, the past, as you were saying, past, present, future. That.
If the outward going one, the notional one,
Uh-huh.
the assumed one, the individual, if he has never come to be, if he was never born, then nothing else was ever created. Neither time, past, present, and future, nor worlds, nor bodies, nor thought forms, nor anything else. What is the perpetual existence, pure consciousness. It has not begun, it is existing, always. It has not given rise to anything else. It just is as it is, and it alone is.
So where in that only alone solitary spot can anything be created? And it's sort of the inquiry.
That solitary, indivisible existence, which is one without a second, without anything else whatsoever, is the significance of Advaita, non-duality, Kavalyam, that which alone is. That is Brahman. That is the meaning of Shiva. And that is the only real definition of I.
Because everything else never existed. I mean, that's really the...
Just one existence is. Always. In this realization, there is steady knowledge, for there can be no cause of unsteadiness. And in this there is certitude, being beyond differentiation, nirvikalpa. It is beyond doubt, nirvikalpa.
That makes sense. So the doubter would have to be, so if there was doubt.
Then the Maharshi says, doubt the doubter.
That makes sense. Because then, I mean, it's a funny term, doubt the doubter, but...
Then the whole of illusion just gets swallowed up, gone without a trace.
Because
the doubting and the doubt is only in and for the doubter. The doubter proves to be non-existent. All that is there is the self. Ignorance is then said to be burned up without a trace. Because the individual, or ego, never came to be, he cannot return.
I guess that's why they always use it. I mean, this is kind of a gross analogy, but the picture show thing, right? Because really what's solid, you think that something's occurred, but really nothing was really happening.
Only the screen was there the whole time. To one who sees and is caught up in the pictures being projected on the screen, it is pointed out that the screen remains unaffected, the substrate. But what actually is there the whole time? Only the screen. The images are entirely unreal. So of course the reality, the existence was unaffected. There wasn't anything else truly there to affect it.
But what you're saying now, though, is that that projection never even occurred. I mean,
Yes, all analogies can only be used to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Just to bring forth or to clarify a particular spiritual point.
But I'm just saying that what you're saying, though, to me now, though, is that actual projection of the movie never occurred. I mean, it was only the screen.
That's right.
And that only, if it was imagined that there was a projection, then it'd have to be found out for whom was the projection, essentially. It comes down to that fulcrum.
If we so inquire for whom it is, who is the seer of it? The scene is swallowed up. The projector is no more.
One could doubt the questioner, and that would be swallowed up just as easily as the doubter.
Whether it be the questioner, the doubter, the thinker, different attire for the same
Any costume,
invisible man.
oneself is. It would be possible to doubt that truth if something in the objective realm, in the realm of name and form, would know me or acknowledge me even. But that would never happen because nothing in the realm of name and form exists or has ever come to be.
When I meditate, I usually seek a place that's quiet, low light, and I usually close my eyes when I meditate. And so when I open my eyes, or when I meditate, it becomes really clear. The existence becomes very clear. And if I open my eyes, the sensory input goes up. I can see that there's perceptions, and then there's the cognitive thing that happens of sorting out what's being seen. And it appears to be an addition or a different thing than existence. So I ask, well, who's this for? It doesn't have the quality that existence has got. Existence doesn't have any of that mental activity at all to it. It's devoid of any of that. So it's got to be for somebody, but when I open my eyes, I often don't question who that's for immediately. And if I question it, it really diminishes that there is something else going on. But then I ask myself, I say, no, wait a minute, when most people meditate, they want to reduce the sensory input, it's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But when the sensory input increases, it doesn't appear as existence, it appears as something else.
What makes it appear as something else? Yes, when meditators meditate, they often close the eyes and do things like you described. It may be because it's found to be helpful to have less sensory input, or may simply be due to the wisdom of knowing that one is not interested in the senses at that point. What you're seeking is a non-sensory experience. Not that the senses being active would be an obstruction, but simply there is no interest. What makes for the differentiation? In the teachings of Vedanta, the text that you have read, you've probably come across such terms as indriyas, senses, manas, the mind, buddhi, the intellect, citta, memory. There are these activities. How can they stand apart from existence? Looking at the mind part itself, usually 3, sometimes 4 parts are enumerated. Manas, which is all the cognitive quality or cognitive power, using only the light of consciousness, for what else could give the knowledge to that? That's the cognition of the senses and the ability to mentally discern what is being sensed. Buddhi is intelligence or intellect, the ability to understand. It can be used in correct or incorrect ways, but that's not our concern right at this moment. There is this ability to so think, to have active intellect, again with borrowed light, reflected light. Where is the power to truly understand residing? Then there's citta, in this case meaning more like memory. It gives a sense of continuity to the mental conceptions and cognitions. Again, where does the continuity really reside? What gives it its light? What gives it its apparent solidity? The 4th part, sometimes enumerated, is not really a part at all. Ahankara, I-ness, ego sense. With that aham, I, with that ego sense, everything's differentiated. If there's that one, there are many. If there is not that I, then the very seed for differentiation is missing. And all the previous that has just been described is only of, in and by, the one solitary existence, the real self. given this as an explanation of the activities of what we loosely just call the mind. When you open your eyes in meditation, does that signal an end of meditation? When you open your eyes or the other senses become active, does that mean in itself a change of state?
No, the existence is still quite obvious.
So what change has occurred? Or has a change occurred?
If I look at the sensed objects, it's clear that they're inert. They have nothing on their own. It's clear that it's only by the existence that they have any existence, or appear to have any.
So they're both inert, having no power to bind. At the same time, they're not really self-existent, being utterly dependent on you, the perceiver. So what is the difference for you between eyes open and eyes closed? We could extend it to other activities as well, but we'll start just with the eyes.
There is no difference in my existence.
Do you have an experience apart from your existence?
That's a funny question. Yeah, I have these experiences that
don't exist.
That don't exist. Samsara is just like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have this whole other thing that goes on. I'm just saying jokingly now. It's like saying, "Oh, I have this whole other world that goes on, but it doesn't exist." Or more close to home, I have a second that does all this stuff.
Your eyes are open now. Is the existence changed from when you had them closed?
Well, when you ask, or when you say your eyes are open, I have to ask, who are they open for, and who's got these eyes? And it kind of gets rid of the idea of eyes being open.
Mm-hmm. One could be vividly daydreaming that his eyes were open. That's the dream. While indeed they were closed. It is similar to that when meditation drawing to a close, you open your eyes. Of course, if you see it that way, meditation does not conclude. And the eyes being open or closed is utterly insignificant. Works for the ears too.
It works for all objects. There's nobody left out. Okay, I kind of get it. It's like there's no... I wasn't thinking so much in terms of meditation ending. It was more in terms of something had been added. But when I think of meditation, I just think of that solid existence that it just doesn't go away.
Yes, that's the first thing to notice, that it doesn't go away. It's solid and unchanging.
Yeah.
But does something really get added to it?
That's what I'm starting to catch on to now. That addition just doesn't happen.
If we imagine something is added to it, then the meditation state, even if we don't say it has concluded, we say that it has been altered, something changed. But if nothing's actually been added, then you remain the same. Nothing has changed.
Yeah, dreams don't add to reality or affect it. They don't have any.
A person could dream a whole world, but nothing would have been created. It could go on for a long time, but really, it would not have gone on at all.
That's very freeing because one is untouched by any of that.
One's certitude becomes firm, and he remains unaffected because of the solidity of being, its immutability, and also because there's nothing else added on to do any affecting. Last question.
This expression, which is it's all good or it's all grace. So if it is all grace, then isn't even the illusion or dream or the vasana that also? In that it's a context within which the awakening or the dissolution thereof comes to the awakening.
We can accept it that way. We can say it is all good, and thereby we emphasize the right aspect of it. Or we can go further and say it is all good. Shiva means the good. It's all Shiva. In which case it means Shiva is. And what we thought was all was really just Shiva. So the first is sifting the essence of the illusion. And the latter is just the essence without illusion.
It's also in that expression, the value of that expression, or that it's all grace, is that it allows one to not resist or fight it when it appears.
Fight what?
The mind fighting it.
Fight what?
Precisely. But in the fighting itself, in the fighting itself of the mind, or the identification with the mind and the fighting, is the reinforcement thereof, the illusion.
Do you apply this understanding to phenomenal things, such as if when something's not to your liking?
At times, yeah.
Okay.
If I'm going to be truthful.
That's a good idea. There may be something not to your liking. If you accept that it is all grace, even if you make efforts to rectify the situation, you will still be without attachment. Happy in a state of grace. Consider Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. He had to do a lot of fighting. Did that mean he was out of grace? In the end of the chapter 18, the final chapter of the Gita, Arjuna says, "My memory has been restored." What did he remember? Krishna has expounded the teaching, starting with the second chapter on the nature of reality and the self, and proceeding thereafter to cover all aspects. What did Arjuna remember?
It's true nature.
The very same as grace. He had understood. He had truly surrendered himself.
It's all good.
All good.
यदि मोह विषाद विहीन परो यदि संशय शोक हीन पर यदि चैक निरंतर सर्व शिवम अहमेति ममेति कथम च पुनः.
Indeed, Brahman is free from delusion and depression, doubt and distress. If Brahman alone is the indivisible supreme beatitude, how can there be I and mine?
Nanu dharma vidharma vinasha iti nanu bandha vibandha vinasha iti yadi chaika nirantara sarva shivam iha dukkha vidukha madischa katham.
Truly, the distinctions of merit and demerit, bondage and freedom, are annulled in Brahman. If Brahman alone is the indivisible supreme beatitude, how can there be feelings of misery and happiness?
Nahi yatnika yajna vibhaga iti nahutasha navastu vibhaga iti yadi chaika nirantara sarva shivam vada karma phalani bhavanti katham.
In Brahman, there is no distinction between sacrificer and sacrifice, or between sacrificial fire and oblation. If Brahman alone is the indivisible supreme beatitude, tell me, how can there be any results of action?
Nanu shoka vishoka vimukta iti nanu darpa vidarpa vimukta iti yadi chaika nirantara sarva shivam nanu raga viraga madischa katham.
Indeed, Brahman is free from grief and joy, pride and humility. If Brahman alone is the indivisible supreme beatitude, how can there be any thought of passion or dispassion?
Nahi moha vimoha vikara iti nahi lobha vilobha vikara iti yadi chaika nirantara sarva shivam viveka viveka madischa katham.
Infatuation and temptation, greed and delusion cannot perturb or change Brahman. If Brahman alone is the indivisible supreme beatitude, how can there be any thought of discrimination or absence of discrimination?
Tvamaham nahi hanta kadachitapi kulajati vicharam asatyamiti अहमेव शिवः परमार्थ इति अभिवादनमत्र करोमि कथम्.
Look, you and I have never existed. It is sheer nonsense to consider oneself as having a family or caste. Truly, I am Brahman, the supreme reality. How can I make salutations to it?
Guru Shishya Vichara Vishirna iti Upadesha Vichara Vishirna iti Ahameva Shiva Paramartha iti Abhivadanamatra Karomi Katham.
Discrimination between guru and disciple and between instruction and reflection are completely absent in Brahman. Truly, I am Brahman, the supreme reality. How can I make salutations to it?
Nahi kalpita deha vibhaga iti, nahi kalpita loka vibhaga iti, ahameva shiva paramartha iti, abhivadanamatra karomi katham.
In Brahman, there is no division of physical forms, nor of imaginary worlds. Truly, I am Brahman, the supreme reality. How can I make salutations to it?
Sarajo virajo na kadachitapi nanu nirmala nischala shuddha iti ahameva shiva paramartha iti abhivadanamatra karomi katham.
Brahman is completely free from passion and dispassion. Indeed, it is resplendent, immovable, and pure. Truly, I am Brahman, the supreme reality. How can I make salutations to it?
Nahi deha videha vikalpa iti anritam charitam nahi satyamiti ahameva shiva paramartha iti abhivadanamatra karomi katham.
It is mere fancy to think that Brahman has a body or that it is bodiless. The apparent actions of life are also unreal. Truly, I am Brahman, the supreme reality. How can I make salutations to it?
Vindadi vindadi nahi nahi yatra chando lakshanam nahi nahi tatra samarasamagno bhavita putaha pralapadi tattvam paramavadhutaha.
Where the intellect cannot reach, how can there be any form of composition? The great Avadhuta, after purifying himself through meditation and becoming absorbed in infinite bliss, has sung spontaneously about Brahman.